Meditation of each and every one of our hearts here today to please God, who is our eternal rock and our Redeemer. In today's passage, we start the second missionary journey of Paul. To help you kind of get a sense of where we are in Acts, we're working our way through Acts, and to give you a kind of sense, I put together an outline, which you can see here on the overhead, which shows where we are. We started with the birth of the church at Pentecost in Acts chapter 1 and 2, and I'm standing right in the way, aren't I?
Yes.
Thank you. I'll try to get out of the way as best I can. I'll try and stay out of the way. Chapters 3 through 9, we saw the growth of the church, the spread of the church, and that was within Jerusalem. That was Peter's preaching, 3,000 coming to faith, the growth of the church within Jerusalem. But then the church was scattered with the martyrdom of Stephen. And in chapters 13 through 21, we see it spreading out through all the area. We see Philip speaking to the Ethiopian. And we see all the different, Peter going to Cornelius. And so now the gospel is not limited to Jews only, but now it's going out to all different types of people. Then in chapter 13 and 14, this is a subsection of the church to all nations. This is a subsection you can see 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, all the way through 21. There's subsection. And that represents the first missionary journey of Paul. We've looked at that. We've seen that. We've gone from city to city with Paul. He's gone on his loop. He's backtracked. He's come back to Antioch. And then in chapter 15 we had the council. What did the council deal with? What did they address? The question of what? Circumcision. Basically, how are people saved? Are they saved by being circumcised and following the law of the Old Testament? Or are they saved by God's grace and faith in Jesus Christ? And so an entire chapter is devoted to that question, right in the midst of these three missionary journeys. And that brings us to chapter 16, which is the second missionary journey, where we pick up today. This next slide will show you the map of the second missionary journey. We're going to start here in Antioch. Last week, that's where we started. Paul went up, around. Remember I said he stopped in Tarsus. He probably went through Tarsus. That was his hometown. While Barnabas and John Mark went down to Cyprus. Remember, they were going to kind of take opposite routes, where Paul was going to start at the end of their last missionary journey. Barnabas was going to start at the beginning. They were going to kind of conquer and cover all of the area together. One starting at the end, one starting at the beginning, cover all of the area. So today, we're going to pick up from this area. And remember, I told you in the first missionary journey, they came to Derbe, and Paul was a straight shot from Derbe to Tarsus, his hometown, but he chose not to go there because it was more important to him, rather than going home and showing Barnabas his home turf and showing him how wonderful Tarsus was. He said, we need to go back and make sure all of our churches are doing well. All these new baby churches are doing well. So they turned around and went back. But now, Paul goes through Tarsus, and I said that there's a strait right through the mountains here. We're going to get to see that here in a second. But he's going to go to Derbe and Lystra. And that's where we're going to stop our look at today. It's going to be only 5 verses. We're only going to cover 5 verses today, where we're going to get to see a few different things he's going to teach us. So let's go to the next slide. This is a Roman foundation located in Tarsus, Paul's hometown. All right? And the thing you want to notice about this Roman ruin, they're not sure whether it was a temple or a warehouse, but it's there in Tarsus. The thing you want to notice is the woman in the picture. Who can see her? Where is she, Jimmy?
To the right, not know what.
By the brush. Here's the woman, right here between my fingers. So that gives you some perspective of the size, the massive size of this foundation in Tarsus. But the Bible's silent on what happens in Tarsus. So basically, we just passed through Tarsus. The next slide. Here is the gates, the Cilician gates that I was saying that Paul would have had to pass through. They had this cut right through the mountains. This natural pass that went right through, and there was a road back then. So Paul would have traveled on this road. Probably didn't have macadam at the time, but this would have been the road that he traveled on, right in these footsteps. Not only him, but lots of people, like Alexander the Great, when he was conquering all the Middle East. had to come through here. Xerxes, when he was conquering, going north into the easternmost parts of Europe to conquer part of the Persian Empire. So a lot of famous armies and people passed through this gate, including the Apostle Paul on his way from Tarsus to our next slide, to Derbe. Now, the location of Derbe was unknown for sure. We knew about where Derbe was. But in 1956, an archaeologist discovered this stone, which had an inscription on it about identifying the location as Derbe. This stone dates from around 157 AD. So that's less than 100 years after Paul was there. A city named Derbe existed in this spot, which is just about where the Bible, almost exactly pinpoint right where the Bible says it would be. And this stone was found on the next slide on this hill. This is Derbe. No town there exists today. This is called a tell. The youth group knows what a tell is, right? Right? What's a tell? They're elbowing each other. Everybody, no, you tell them, you tell them. A tell is basically when a city has existed in an area, and then the city has, for one reason or another, been abandoned or destroyed. And what happens is the buildings fall in, the dirt covers it, and usually, because it's an area that people can live in very well, there's probably a water source, there's probably a fertile area, they usually rebuild right on that same site. So it's either the slow building up of dirt in an area, or like if an army comes in and raises the city, they'll just build right on top of that. And a tell, basically, oftentimes is layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of city, on top of city, on top of city. So this is the tell called Kirti Hayuk, and Kirti Hayuk is the ancient location of Derbe. It has been unexcavated, as has our next site, next slide. This is the marker denoting Lystra. If you can see,